Greetings, my friends. It's been a while since I used the near fisheye lens to do a ramble, so I thought it'd be fun to give you guys the visual. Many of you may have seen a video that I did. It was a fairly short one about why I selected a cheap router at Walmart instead of a more expensive, more capable, feature-packed router. And it had to do with the business client in question. The equipment that they were using was mostly older computers that would be on the Wi-Fi. The desktops were wired, but their laptops and their various devices scattered throughout were not capable of Wi-Fi AX or 6, whatever you want to call it. So everything was in or AC, and I bought a router that would be faster for the older devices that were running in or AC, instead of buying a router that would be theoretically faster if they had AX, but actually because it supported less spatial streams, it would not be. So it worked out wonderfully. The customer was very, very happy. They were especially happy when I went to install the router and I discovered that their actual problem that was killing their internet and slowing them down the entire time was that somebody plugged up a cable they shouldn't have and created a network loop which caused an infinite packet storm of broadcast packets, thereby locking up all of their switches, sending broadcast packets back and forth to each other. Yeah, and the switches are in the attic, so I can't even get to them. Anyway, that entire prelude is what I want to, that kind of tells you where we are in terms of things being appropriate versus things being, I don't know, we used to call what people did to their cars with big spoilers on their 1.6 liter single overhead cam Honda Civic. We used to call it ricing them out. And I kind of developed an affinity for that term when it was used for people who use Gen 2 Linux and think that they're doing something amazing by compiling every package with custom use flags, and maybe they get a few percent more speed for certain things, but maybe it slows things down, and they never really test. They're just the computer equivalent of putting spoilers on the back of EconoBox cars. I have no shortage of nerds showing up to my video that think that they're smart and ask me why I don't do X, Y, or Z a certain way. Why didn't I buy something better? Why didn't I do something better? What kind of awful person am I that I would refurbish a 14-year-old computer instead of telling them to buy a brand new one? Well, that makes me bad, I guess. Oh well, I'll be bad, because you know what? It's not about whether or not the computer is of a certain age. It's about appropriateness. Some customers do not need a new computer. Some customers do not need a high-end router. Sometimes the best choice is not the nicest one. Sometimes it's not worth it to spend $1,000 extra on a laptop just because, oh, I want to get an i7 or I want to get a high-end processor or more RAM or whatever. Sometimes it's about balancing your actual needs against what's available on the market. That brings us to today's conversation. A wonderful guy who I'm still buddies with today, who worked for me a long time ago. Actually, he worked for me a few times and I fired him a few times. I've probably mentioned him in other videos. But it's been a while since he's done the computer repair thing. Last time he did it for me, like professionally, at least 5-6 years ago. So he doesn't really have the, he doesn't keep up to date with that stuff. He does very different things now, and he's vastly more successful at it. So I wish him all the best in that. And this great guy, he paid me to come and set him up a new computer. The situation, he goes out and he meets clients. He does various things. I don't want to reveal too much, but the bottom line is he has clients and he has to do various work to prep for meeting clients. And he also has to go out there and talk to them. And he has a laptop. The laptop, whatever laptop he has, is sort of the nerve center of his entire business. He can't really do very much without his computer with him. The problem that he was having is that he had a new computer. He had a computer, I believe it was a Dell from 2022. It was not inherently a bad computer, but this Dell, the battery life was not great. And that was the major problem, actually, is battery life was extremely important. Being able to carry it around neatly and such wasn't as important. I think it was a little smaller than the one I told him to get, but he needed battery life more than anything, but he also didn't want to spend a ton of money. Now, obviously, the battery life kings tend to be MacBooks, really. I hate Apple products, but you've got to give them that. At least they have gotten, they emphasize battery life over a lot of things, like Pro laptops actually having Pro features. But you can get legendary battery life, like 24 hours, out of certain newer Mac models. And that's sort of their big selling point to people that aren't just Apple-obsessed freaks. Unfortunately, this guy may have to run custom software for his business that may only run on Windows. I don't know 100%, so we can't risk shoving him onto a Mac, and he's not going to want a Mac anyway. So that leaves us with high-end laptops and low-end laptops and all that, but they have to be PCs. No Chromebooks, no MacBooks. Battery life's very important. Being able to carry it is okay, but a bigger screen's probably good. He does work with older people a lot. So ultimately, I shopped and I found him a good choice. It was an Asus VivoBook. I don't remember the model number, but it was a VivoBook with an i5U processor, not an H or HQ or HK or a Ryzen 9 or anything like that. It was an ultra-low voltage Intel chip that maxes out at around 15 watts. The TDP is 15 watts. I shouldn't say maxes out. But it has a low TDP. The other options in his segment there, if he got a nicer Intel chip in the same laptop, those chips could be up to 45 watts. Same with the Ryzen 9 that also can be gotten in that laptop, which is actually what I got. I got the same basic laptop, but with a Ryzen 9. I've detailed in other videos some of my thermal issues with it that I've had to use software to control. But that same software actually helped me here. See, he needs battery life really bad. So it was not important to get him the fastest. He was looking at other machines with i7s and really kind of gravitating toward that. That would have been a bad choice. An i7 is actually one of the worst choices that he could make, because if he needs battery life, there is a problem with the way that CPUs are designed. And yes, I'm aware these newer Intel chips, they have performance and efficiency cores and all that stuff. But that's not really important, because even if you have P and E cores, the design of the chip is still fundamentally tuned more towards performance if you're getting an i7, especially if you're getting a non-U i7. If it's not ultra-low voltage, then it's going to use a lot more power even when idle. Even when supposedly being efficient, you've still got more cores, whatever. And if it does hit the P cores on an i7, they're going to pull a lot more juice. We don't want to do that. So I told him to get the i5 because it's a good balance of the power that he's lusting for, while at the same time not wasting battery life on, look at me, I have a 7 instead of a 5, and have a bunch of cores I'm not going to use. Most of this guy's use case is basically Adobe Reader, not Adobe Reader, but he actually has the full Acrobat suite. So he has to edit PDFs, run web apps in a browser, and use Microsoft Office stuff, mainly Word. That's really it. He doesn't need 32 gigs of RAM. That would just be more RAM to power, which means less battery life. He doesn't need a high-end, high-capacity SSD. That could potentially just mean more heat generated, thus less battery life. There's no point in all these nice, fancy features because they're not actually going to give him any benefit whatsoever. He's running a web browser. He's just running a browser. Now, granted, I gave him WaterFox and told him you do your normal browsing in that, and he has to use Google Chrome for the business that he's doing. So because he's stuck on Chrome, he does need a little more RAM because Chrome is a fat pig. But still, the machine we picked out, i5 ULV, 16 gigs of RAM, I think, and a 512 gig SSD, of which he's using like 40. So who cares? But anyway, the reason that we picked this is that this combination of things maximized battery life without sacrificing too much in the way of performance and specs. He probably didn't need an i5. He would have been fine with an i3, but honestly, I couldn't find an i3 that was suitable, so he ended up with an i5. It's an Asus VivoBook, so I gave him the same software, G Helper, which if you have an Asus laptop, you should get G Helper and check out the tuning options it gives you. So when he's plugged in, just like on my laptop, when he's plugged in, I have G Helper switch him into turbo mode. Higher fan curves, more turbo boost capacity. When he's plugged in, he's got that speed. That i5's running full bore. But when he unplugs, G Helper switches him into silent mode and flips off turbo boost and switches to best power efficiency mode in Windows, best battery, instead of best performance. So with the turbo stuff throttled back, with the fan off unless absolutely necessary, and with the overall power mode set to maximize battery life, here's the end result. His previous laptop, which was a perfectly fine Dell, which he, by the way, he would discharge the battery really, really low, like to 10%, and then charge it. Worst thing you can do for the battery. I fixed him on that too. Told him, keep it charged as much as you can. Discharging is the worst thing you can do for long-term battery life. So the end result was he took a specific day. I think it was the next day after he started using the computer after I did everything that I did. And he looked at what he had to do and how long it took. He worked on battery for approximately 4 hours. And after the 4 hours, he looked at his battery and he was at 54%. We can reasonably ascertain that he could get 7 to 8 hours of battery life out of this computer, which is exactly what he needed. And it turned out he didn't even need that. He had a break in the middle, and he probably has several breaks during the day, like when he's driving or whatever. So his battery's not being drained all day. This laptop absolutely met his battery life needs. And I think that he spent, like a $500 computer? But it absolutely did everything he needed in terms of the battery life. He also said that with all the tuning and stuff that I had done, and with getting the better machine than that Dell that he had, that he also noticed his prep. He said it takes about 2 hours for him to do the prep that he needs to do in a typical day to get all the documentation and information set up and available so that when he goes and meets with people, he can just do what he needs to do, and that's just the end of it. It turns out that his prep time, due to the faster page loading and just overall all these little like tiny waits that were now removed, he's a few seconds less to wait for every single page to start or every web app to flip or whatever. He actually said that he went from 2 hours to just a little bit over 1 hour. This computer is literally paying for itself, because now he has extra time that he can use to do something else to advance his business. Or he just has almost an extra hour to do something personal that he would rather do. And that's why it's important to pick things that are suitable, not things that, not things that would somehow make you feel better about it, or that just like throw money at the wall and see what sticks. You could buy a gaming laptop and do this stuff. But the battery life would be crap, and it would be expensive, and it would be less suitable. Don't use a screwdriver as a hammer. That really is the gist of what I wanted to get across. It's important whenever you do anything to make sure that what you're doing is correct, not just that it makes you feel like it's correct, or that it's like, I think this is the best. You should actually get what is best for your situation. Now, he could have, what are the alternatives? He could have gotten a $2,000 laptop. He could have gotten a really fancy, expensive machine that had an i7 ULV or something. He could have gotten, I don't even know if they have i9s in that, but he could have gotten a much, quote, nicer machine. But it probably would have had lower battery life, or if it had the same battery life, well, what's he really getting for that? That's kind of the fundamental issue with a lot of this stuff. Is what are you really getting for all the money that you're putting into this machine? And frankly, the machines that could give him the kind of battery life that he needed, that weren't Macs, and that had nicer processors or whatever, they were out of his budget, and also, frankly, they were not appropriate. What he got was really the best case for his particular needs. And that's always the point, is that It's about the needs that you have. It's not about some kind of like feel-good nonsense. Anyway, that's enough of that. I've got to go and take a package to UPS people. So, you know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe. By the way, YouTube likes to not, they don't care that you watch the video, so leave a comment or like or whatever. Interactions are how they determine whether or not you like content. They don't care that you just watched anymore. And it's stupid, but there it is. Take it easy.